Chapter 11. The Ashburns. Gregory Ashburn pushed back his chair and made shift to rise from the table at which he and his brother had but dined. He was a tall, heavily built man with a coarse, florid countenance set in a frame of reddish hair that hung straight and limp. In the color of their hair lay the only point of resemblance between the brothers. For the rest, Joseph was spare and of middle weight, pale of face, thin-lipped, and owning a cunning expression that was rendered very evil by virtue of the slight cast in his colorless eyes. In earlier life, Gregory had not been unhandsome. Debauchery and sloth had puffed and coarsened him. Joseph, on the other hand, had never been aught but ill-favored. "'Tis a week since Worcester field was fought," grumbled Gregory, looking lazily sideways at the mullioned windows as he spoke, and never a word from the lad. Joseph shrugged his narrow shoulders and sneered. It was Joseph's habit to sneer when he spoke, and his words were wont to fit the sneer. "Doth the lack of news trouble you?" he asked, glancing across the table at his brother. Gregory rose without meeting that glance. "Truth to tell, it does trouble me," he muttered. "And yet," quoth Joseph, "'tis a natural thing enough. When battles are fought, it is not uncommon for men to die." Gregory crossed slowly to the window and stared out at the trees of the park which autumn was fast stripping. If he were among the fallen, if he were dead, then indeed the matter would be at an end. "Aye, and well ended." "You forget Cynthia," Gregory reproved him. "Forget her? Not I, man. Listen." And he jerked his thumb in the direction of the wainscot. To the two men in that rich chamber of Castle Marley was borne the sound, softened by distance, of a girlish voice merrily singing. Joseph laughed a cackle of contempt. "Is that the song of a maid whose lover comes not back from the wars?" he asked. "But bethink you, Joseph, the child suspects not the possibility of his having fallen. Gad's wound, sir, did your daughter give the fellow a thought? She must be anxious. A week yesterday since the battle, and no word from him. I dare swear, Gregory, there's little in that to warrant his mistress singing. Cynthia is young, a child. She reasons not as you and I, nor seeks to account for his absence. Troubles not to account for it," Joseph amended. "Be that as it may," returned Gregory irritably, "I would I knew. That which we do not know we may sometimes infer. I infer him to be dead, and there's the end of it. What if he should not be? Then, my good fool, he would be here. It is unlike you, Joseph, to argue so loosely. What if he should be a prisoner? Why? Then the plantations will do that which the battle hath left undone, so that, dead or captive, you see it is all one." And, lifting his glass to the light, he closed one eye, the better to survey with the other the rich color of the wine. Not that Joseph was curious touching that color, but he was a juggler in gestures, and at that moment he could think of no other whereby he might so naturally convey the utter indifference of his feelings in the matter. "Joseph, you are wrong," said Gregory, turning his back upon the window and facing his brother. "It is not all one. What if he returns some day?" "Oh, what if, cried Joseph testily. "Gregory, what a casuist you might have been had not nature made you a villain. You are as full of what if-s as an egg of meat. Well, what if some day he should return? I fling your question back. What if? God only knows." "Then leave it to him," was the flippant answer, and Joseph drained his glass. "Nay, brother, 'twere too great a risk. I must, and I will know whether Kenneth were slain or not. If he is a prisoner, then we must exert ourselves to win his freedom." "Plague take it," Joseph burst out. "Why all this ado? Why did you ever loose that graceless whelp from his Scottish moor?" Gregory sighed with an air of resigned patience. "I have more reasons than one," he answered slowly. "If you need that I recite them to you, I pity your wits. Look you, Joseph, you have more influence with Cromwell, far more than have I, and if you're minded to do so, you can serve me in this. I wait but to learn how. Then go to Cromwell, at Windsor or wherever he may be, and seek to learn from him if Kenneth is a prisoner. If he is not, then clearly he is dead." Joseph made a gesture of impatience. "Can you not leave fate alone?" "Think you I have no conscience, Joseph?" cried the other with sudden vigor. "Pish, you are womanish." "Nay, Joseph, I am old. I am in the autumn of my days, and I would see these two wed before I die." And are damned for a croaking, maudlin craven, added Joseph. Pa, you make me sick. There was a moment's silence, during which the brothers eyed each other, Gregory with a sternness before which Joseph's mocking eye was forced at length to fall. Joseph, you shall go to the Lord General. Well, said Joseph weakly, we will say that I go, but if Kenneth be a prisoner, what then? You must beg his liberty from Cromwell. He will not refuse you. Will he not? I am none so confident. But you can make the attempt, and leastways we shall have some definite knowledge of what has befallen the boy, the which definite knowledge seems to me none so necessary. Moreover, Gregory, bethink you, there has been a change, and the wind carries an edge that will rouse every devil of rheumatism in my bones. I am not a lad, Gregory, and traveling at this season is no small matter for a man of 50. Gregory approached the table, and leaning his hand upon it, will you go? He asked, squarely eyeing his brother. Joseph fell a pondering. He knew Gregory to be a man of fixed ideas, and he bethought him that were he now to refuse, he would be hourly plagued by Gregory's speculations touching the boy's fate and recriminations touching his own selfishness. On the other hand, however, the journey daunted him. He was not a man to sacrifice his creature comforts, and to be asked to sacrifice them to a mere whim, a shadow, added weight to his inclination to refuse the undertaking. Since you have the matter so much at heart, said he at length, does it not occur to you that you could plead with greater fervor and be the likelier to succeed? You know that Cromwell will lend a more willing ear to you than to me. Perchance because you know so well upon occasion how to weave your stock of texts into your discourse, he added with a sneer. Will you go, Joseph? Bethink you that we know not where he is. I may have to wander for weeks over the face of England. Will you go? Gregory repeated. Oh, a pox on it, broke out Joseph, rising suddenly. I'll go since naught else will quiet you. I'll start tomorrow. Joseph, I am grateful. I shall be more grateful yet if you will start today. No, sink me, no. Yes, sink me, yes, returned Gregory. You must, Joseph. Joseph spoke of the wind again. The sky, he urged, was heavy with rain. What signifies a day, he whined. This being determined, Joseph left his brother, and cursing Master Stewart for the amount of discomfort which he was about to endure on his behoof, he went to prepare for the journey. Gregory lingered still in the chamber where they had dined, and sat staring moodily before him at the table linen. Anon, with a half-laugh of contempt, he filled a glass of muscadine and drained it. As he set down the glass, the door opened, and on the threshold stood a very dainty girl, whose age could not be more than 20. Gregory looked on the fresh, oval face, with its wealth of brown hair crowning the low, broad forehead, and told himself that in his daughter he had just cause for pride. He looked again, and told himself that his brother was right. She had not the air of a maid whose lover returns not from wars. Her lips were smiling, and the eyes, low-lidded and blue as the heavens, were bright with mirth. Why sit you there so glum, she cried, whilst my uncle, they tell me, is going on a journey? Gregory was minded to put her feelings to the test. Kenneth, he replied with significant emphasis, watching her closely. The mirth faded from her eyes, and they took on a grave expression that added to their charm. But Gregory had looked for fear, leastways deep concern, and in this he was disappointed. What of him, father? She asked, approaching. Naught, and that's the rub. It is time we had news, and as none comes, your uncle goes to seek it. Think you that it can have befallen him? Gregory was silent a moment, weighing his answer. Then, we hope not, sweetheart, said he. He may be a prisoner. We last had news of him from Worcester, and 'tis a week and more since the battle was fought there. Should he be a captive, your uncle has sufficient influence to obtain his enlargement. Cynthia sighed and moved towards a window. Poor Kenneth, she murmured gently. He may be wounded. We shall soon learn, he answered. His disappointment grew keener. Where he looked for grief, he found no more than an expression of pitying concern. Nor was his disappointment lessened when, after a spell of thoughtful silence, she began to comment upon the condition of the trees in the park below. Gregory had it in his mind to chide her for this lack of interest in the fate of her intended husband, but he let the impulse pass unheeded. After all, if Kenneth lived, she should marry him. Hitherto she had been docile and willing enough to be guided by him. She had even displayed a kindness for Kenneth. No doubt she would do so again when Joseph returned with him, unless he were among the Worcester slain, in which case, perhaps, it would prove best that his fate was not to cause her any prostration of grief. "The sky is heavy, father," said Cynthia from the window. "Poor uncle, he will have rough weather for his journey." "I rejoice that someone wastes pity on poor uncle," growled Joseph, who re-entered. "This uncle whom your father drives out of doors in all weathers to look for his daughter's truant lover." Cynthia smiled upon him. "It is heroic of you, uncle." There, he grumbled. "I shall do my best to find the laggard, lest those pretty eyes should weep away their beauty." Gregory's glance reproved the sneer of Joseph's, whereupon Joseph drew close to him. "Broken-hearted, is she not?" he muttered, to which Gregory returned no answer. An hour later, as Joseph climbed into his saddle, he turned to his brother again, and directing his eyes upon the girl, who stood patting the glossy neck of his nag. "Come now," said he, "you see that matters are as I said." "And yet," replied Gregory sternly, "I hope to see you return with the boy. It will be better so." Joseph shrugged his shoulders contemptuously. Then, taking leave of his brother and his niece, he rode out with 2 grooms at his heels, and took the road south. Chapter 12. The house that was Roland Marley's. It was high noon next day, and Gregory Ashburn was taking the air upon the noble terrace of Castle Marley, when the beat of hoofs, rapidly approaching up the avenue, arrested his attention. He stopped in his walk, and turning, sought to discover who came. His first thought was of his brother, his second of Kenneth. Through the half-denuded trees he made out 2 mounted figures, riding side by side, and from the fact of there being 2, he adduced that this could not be Joseph returning. Even as he waited, he was joined by Cynthia, who took her stand beside him, and voiced the inquiry that was in his mind. But her father could no more than answer that he hoped it might be Kenneth. Then the horseman passed from behind the screen of trees, and came into the clearing before the terrace. And unto the waiting glances of Ashburn and his daughter was revealed a curiously bedraggled and ill-assorted pair. The one riding slightly in advance looked like a Puritan of the meaner sort, in his battered steeple hat and cloak of rusty black. The other was closely wrapped in a red mantle, up-tilted behind by a sword of prodigious length, and for all that his broad, gray hat was unadorned by any feather, it was said a rakish ruffling, dammy angle that pronounced him no likely comrade for the piously clad youth beside him. But beneath that brave red cloak, alack, as was presently seen when they dismounted, that gentleman was in a sorry plight. He wore a leather jerkin, so cut and soiled that any groom might have disdained it, a pair of green breeches, frayed to their utmost, and coarse boots of untanned leather adorned by rusty spurs. On the terrace, Gregory paused a moment to call his groom to attend the newcomers. Then he passed down the steps to greet Kenneth with boisterous effusion. Behind him, slow and stately as a woman of twice her years, came Cynthia. Calm was her greeting of her lover, contained in courteous expressions of pleasure at beholding him safe, and suffering him to kiss her hand. In the background, his sable locks uncovered out of deference to the lady, stood Sir Crispin, his face pale and haggard, his lips parted, and his gray eyes burning as they fell again, after the lapse of years, upon the stones of his home, the castle to which he was now come, hat in hand, to beg for shelter. Gregory was speaking, his hands resting upon Kenneth's shoulder. "We have been much exercised concerning you, lad," he was saying. "We almost feared the worst, and yesterday Joseph left us to seek news of you at Cromwell's hands. Where have you tarried?" "Anon, sir, you shall learn anon. The story is a long one. True, you will be tired, and perchance you would first rest a while. Cynthia will see to it. But what scarecrow have you there? What tatterdemalion is this?" he cried, pointing to Galliard. He had imagined him a servant, but the dull flush that overspread Sir Crispin's face told him of his error. "I would have you know, sir," Crispin began with some heat, when Kenneth interrupted him. "'Tis to this gentleman, sir, that I owe my presence here. He was my fellow prisoner, and but for his quick wit and stout arm I should be stiff by now. Anon. Sir, you shall hear the story of it, and I dare swear it will divert you. This gentleman is Sir Crispin Galliard, lately a captain of horse with whom I served in Milton's brigade." Crispin bowed low, conscious of the keen scrutiny in which Gregory's eyes were bent upon him. In his heart there arose a fear that, Happily, after all, the years that were sped had not wrought sufficient change in him. Sir Crispin Galliard, Ashburn was saying, after the manner of one who is searching his memory. Galliard, not he whom they called Rakelly Galliard, and who gave us such trouble in the late king's time? Crispin breathed once more. Ashburn's scrutiny was explained. The same, sir, he answered, with a smile and a fresh bow. Your servant, sir, and yours, madam. Cynthia looked with interest at the lank, soldierly figure. She, too, had heard, as who had not, wild stories of this man's achievements. But of no feat of his had she been told that could rival that of his escape from Worcester, and when, that same evening, Kenneth related it, as they supped, her low-lidded eyes grew very wide, and as they fell on Crispin, admiration had taken now the place of interest. Romance swayed as great a portion of her heart, as it does of most women's. She loved the poets and their songs of great deeds, and here was one who, in the light of that which they related of him, was like an incarnation of some hero out of a romancer's ballad. Kenneth she never yet held in over high esteem, but of a sudden, in the presence of this harsh-featured dog of war, this grim, fierce-eyed ruffler, he seemed to fade, despite his comeliness of face and form, into a poor and puny insignificance. And when, presently, he unwisely related how, when in the boat he had fainted, the maiden laughed outright for very scorn. At this plain expression of contempt, her father shot her a quick, uneasy glance. Kenneth stopped short, bringing his narrative abruptly to a close. Reproachfully he looked at her, turning first red, then white, as anger chased annoyance through his soul. Galliard looked on with quiet relish. Her laugh had contained that which for days he had carried in his heart. He drained his bumper slowly, and made no attempt to relieve the awkward silence that sat upon the company. Truth to tell, there was emotion enough in the soul of him who was wont to be the life of every board he sat at to hold him silent and even moody. Here, after 18 years, was he again in his ancestral home of Marley. But how was he returned? As one who came under a feigned name, to seek from usurping hands a shelter neath his own roof, a beggar that from others which it should have been his to grant or to deny those others. As an avenger he came. For justice he came, and armed with retribution, the flame of a hate unspeakable burning in his heart, and demanding the lives, no less, of those that had destroyed him and his. Yet was he forced to sit a mendicant almost at that board whose head was his by every right, forced to sit and curb his mood, giving no outward sign of the volcano that boiled and raged within his soul as his eye fell upon the florid, smiling face and portly, well-fed frame of Gregory Ashburn. For the time was not yet. He must wait until Joseph returned, so that he might spend his vengeance upon both together. Patient had he been for 18 years, confident that ere he died, a just and merciful God would give him this for which he lived and waited. Yet now that the season was at hand, now upon the very eve of that for which he had so long been patient, a frenzy of impatience fretted him. He drank deep that night, and through deep drinking his manner thawed, for in his cups it was not his to be churlish to friend or foe. Anon Cynthia withdrew, next Kenneth, who went in quest of her. Still Crispin sat on and drank his host's health above his breath, and his perdition under it, till in the end Gregory, who never yet found his master at the bottle, grew numb and drowsy, and sat blinking at the tapers. Until midnight they remained at table, talking of this and that, and each understanding little of what the other said. As the last hour of night boomed out through the great hall, Gregory spoke of bed. "Where do I lie tonight?" asked Crispin. "In the northern wing," answered Gregory with a hiccup. "Nay, sir, I protest," cried Galliard, struggling to his feet, and swaying somewhat as he stood. "I'll sleep in the king's chamber, none other." "The king's chamber?" echoed Gregory, and his face showed the confused struggles of his brain. "What know you of the king's chamber?" "That it faces the east and the sea, and that it is the chamber I love best." "What can you know of it, since, I take it, you have never seen it?" "Have I not?" he began, in a voice that was awful in its threatening calm. Then, recollecting himself, and shaking some of the drunkenness from him, "In the old days, when the Marleys were masters here," he mumbled, "I was often within these walls. Roland Marley was my friend. The king's chamber was ever accorded me, and there, for old time's sake, I'll lay these old bones of mine tonight." "You were Roland Marley's friend?" gasped Gregory. He was very white now, and there was a sheen of moisture on his face. The sound of that name had well-nigh sobered him. It was almost as if the ghost of Roland Marley stood before him. His knees were loosened, and he sank back into the chair from which he had but risen. I was his friend, assented Crispin. Poor Roland. He married your sister, did he not? And it was thus that, having no issue in the family being extinct, Castle Marley passed to you. He married our cousin, Gregory amended. They were an ill-fated family. Ill-fated, indeed, and all accounts be true, returned Crispin in a maudlin voice. Poor Roland. Well, for old time's sake, I'll sleep in the king's chamber, Master Ashburn. You shall sleep where you list, sir, answered Gregory, and they rose. Do you look to honor us long at Castle Marley, Sir Crispin? Was Gregory's last question before separating from his guest. Nay, sir, 'tis likely I shall go hence to-morrow, answered Crispin, unmindful of what he said. I trust not, said Gregory, in accents of relief that belied him. A friend of Roland Marley's must ever be welcome in the house that was Roland Marley's. The house that was Roland Marley's, Crispin muttered. Hago, life is precarious, as the fall of a die at best an ephemeral business. Tonight you say the house that was Roland Marley's. Presently men will be saying the house that the Ashburns lived, aye, and died in. Give you good night, Master Ashburn. He staggered off, and stumbled up the broad staircase at the head of which a servant now awaited, taper in hand, to conduct him to the chamber he demanded. Gregory followed him with a dull, frightened eye. Galliard's halting, thickly uttered words that sounded like a prophecy in his ears. Chapter 13. The Metamorphosis of Kenneth. When the morrow came, however, Sir Crispin showed no signs of carrying out a proposal the night before and departing from Castle Marley, nor, indeed, did he so much as touch upon the subject, bearing himself rather as one whose sojourn there was to be indefinite. Gregory offered no comment upon this. Through what he had done for Kenneth, they were under a debt to Galliard, and whilst he was a fugitive from the Parliament's justice, it would have become Gregory to hasten his departure. Moreover, Gregory recalled little or nothing of the words that had passed between them in their cups, save a vague memory that Crispin had said that he had once known Roland Marley. Kenneth was content that Galliard should lie idle, and not call upon him to go forth again to lend him the aid he had pledged himself to render when Crispin should demand it. He marveled, as the days wore on, that Galliard should appear to have forgotten that task of his, and that he should make no shift to set about it. For the rest, however, it troubled him but little. Enough preoccupation did he find in Cynthia's daily increasing coldness. Upon all the fine speeches that he made her, she turned an idle ear, or she replied all it was but petulantly to interrupt him, to call him a man of great words and small deeds. All that he did she found ill done, and told him of it. His sober, godly garments of somber hue afforded her the first weapon of scorn wherewith to wound him. A crow, she dubbed him, a canting, psalm-chanting hypocrite, a scripture-monger, and every other contumelious epithet of like import that she should call to mind. He heard her in amazement. Is it for you, Cynthia, he cried out in surprise, the child of a God-fearing house, to mock the outward symbols of my faith? A faith, she laughed, that is all outward symbols and naught besides, all texts and mournings and nose-twangings. Cynthia, he exclaimed in horror. Go your way, sir, she answered, half in jest, half in earnest. What need hath a true faith of outward symbols? It is a matter that lies between your God and yourself, and it is your heart he will look at, not your coat. Why, then, without becoming more acceptable in his eyes, shall you but render yourself unsightly in the eyes of man? Kenneth's cheeks were flushed with anger. From the terrace where they walked, he let his glance roam towards the avenue that split the park in twain. Up this at that moment, with the least suspicion of swagger in his gait, Sir Crispin Galliard was approaching leisurely. He wore a claret-colored doublet edged with silver lace, and a gray hat decked with a drooping red feather, which garments, together with the rest of his apparel, he had drawn from the wardrobe of Gregory Ashburn. His advent afforded Kenneth the retort he needed, pointing him out to Cynthia. Would you rather, he cried hotly, have me such a man as that? And pray, why not? She taunted him. Leastways, you would then be a man. If, madam, a debauchee, a drunkard, a profligate. A brawler be your conception of a man. I would in faith you did not account me one. And what, sir, would you sooner elect to be accounted? A gentleman, madam, he answered pompously. I think, said she quietly, that you are in as little danger becoming the one as the other. A gentleman does not slander a man behind his back, particularly when he owes that man his life. Kenneth, I am ashamed of you. I do not slander, he insisted hotly. You yourself know of the drunken excess wherewith 3 nights ago he celebrated his coming to Castle Marley. Nor do I forget what I owe him, and payment is to be made in a manner you little know of. If I said of him what I did, it was but in answer to your taunts. Think you I could endure comparison with such a man as that? Know you what name the royalists give him? They call him the Tavern Knight. She looked him over with an eye of quiet scorn. And how, sir, do they call you? The pulpit knight? Or is it the knight of the white feather? Mr. Stewart, you weary me. I would have a man who with a man's failings hath also a man's redeeming virtues of honesty, chivalry, and courage, and a record of brave deeds, rather than one who has nothing of the man save the coat. That outward symbol you lay such store by. His handsome, weak face was red with fury. Since that is so, madam, he choked, I leave you to your swaggering, ruffling cavalier. And without so much as a bow, he swung round on his heel and left her. It was her turn to grow angry now, and well it was for him that he had not tarried. She dwelt with scorn upon his parting taunt, bethinking herself that in truth she had exaggerated her opinions of Galliard's merits. Her feelings towards that ungodly gentleman were rather of pity than aught else. A brave, ready-witted man she knew him for, as much in the story of his escape from Worcester as for the air that clung to him despite his swagger, and she deplored that one possessing these ennobling virtues should have fallen notwithstanding upon such evil ways as those which Crispin trod. Some day, perchance, when she should come to be better acquainted with him, she would seek to induce him to mend his course. Such root did this thought take in her mind that soon thereafter, and without having waited for that riper acquaintance which at first she had held necessary, she sought to lead their talk into the channels of this delicate subject. But he had sedulously confined it to trivial matter whenever she approached him in this mood, fencing himself about with a wall of cold reserve that was not lightly to be overthrown. In this his conscience was at work. Cynthia was the flaw in the satisfaction he might have drawn from the contemplation of the vengeance he was there to wreak. He beheld her so pure, so sweet and fresh, that he marveled how she came to be the daughter of Gregory Ashburn. His heart smote him at the thought of how she, the innocent, must suffer with the guilty, and at the contemplation of the sorrow which he must visit upon her. Out of this sprang a constraint when in her company, for other than stiff and formal, he dared not be lest he should deem himself no better than the Iscariot. During the first days he had spent at Marley, he had been impatient for Joseph Ashburn's return. Now he found himself hoping each morning that Joseph might not come that day. A courier reached Gregory from Windsor with a letter wherein his brother told him that the Lord General, not being at the castle, he was gone on to London in quest of him, and Gregory, lacking the means to inform him that the missing Kenneth was already returned, was forced to possess his soul in patience until his brother, having learnt what was to be learned of Cromwell, should journey home. And so the days sped on, and a week wore itself out in peace at Castle Marley, none dreaming of the volcano on which they stood. Each night Crispin and Gregory sat together at the board after Kenneth and Cynthia had withdrawn, and both drank deep, the one for the vice of it, the other, as he had always done, to seek forgetfulness. He needed it now more than ever, for he feared that the consideration of Cynthia might yet unman him. Had she scorned and avoided him, and having such evidences of his ways of life, he marveled that she did not. He might have allowed his considerations of her to weigh less heavily. As it was, she sought him out, nor seemed rebuffed at his efforts to evade her, and in every way she manifested a kindliness that drove him almost to the point of despair, and well nigh to hating her. Kenneth, knowing naught of the womanly purpose that actuated her, and seeing but the outward signs, which, with ready jealousy, he misconstrued and magnified, grew sullen and churlish to her, to Galliard, and even to Gregory. For hours he would mope alone, nursing his jealous mood, as though in this clownish fashion matters were to be mended. Did Cynthia but speak to Crispin, he scowled. Did Crispin answer her, he grit his teeth at the covert meaning wherewith his fancy invested Crispin's tones. whilst they chanced to laugh together, a contingency that fortunately for his sanity was rare. He writhed in fury. He was a man transformed, and at times there was murder in his heart. Had he been a swordsman of more than moderate skill, and dared to pit himself against a Tavern Knight, blood would have been shed in Marley Park betwixt them. It seemed at last as if with his insensate jealousy all the evil humors that had lain dormant in the boy were brought to the surface, to overwhelm his erstwhile virtues, if qualities that a bigotry for a parent may truly be accounted virtues. He cast off, not abruptly, but piecemeal, those outward symbols, his somber clothes. First 'twas his hat he exchanged for a feather-trimmed beaver of more sightly hue, then those stiff white bands that reeked of sanctity and cant for a collar of fine point. Next it was his coat that took on a worldly edge of silver lace. And so, little by little, step by step, was the metamorphosis effected, until by the end of the week he came for the very butterfly of fashion, a gallant, dazzling cavalier. Out of a stern, forbidding covenanter, he was transformed in a few days into a most outrageous fop. He walked in an atmosphere of must that he himself exhaled. His fair hair, that a while ago had hung so straight and limp, was now twisted into monstrous curls, a bunch of which were gathered by his right ear in a ribbon of pale blue silk. Galliard noted the change in amazement. Yet, knowing to what follies youth is driven when it woos, he accounted Cynthia responsible for it, and laughed in his sardonic way, whereat the boy would blush and scowl in one. Gregory, too, looked on and laughed, setting it down to the same cause. Even Cynthia smiled, whereat the Tavern Knight was driven to ponder, with a courtier's raiment can have put on, too, a courtier's ways. He grew mincing and affected in his speech, and he, whose utterance a while ago had been marked by a scriptural flavor, now set it off with some of Galliard's less unseemly odes. Since it was a ruffling gallant Cynthia required, he swore that a ruffling gallant should she find him, nor had he wit enough to see that his ribbons, his fopperies, and his capers served but to make him ridiculous in her eyes. He did indeed perceive, however, that in spite of this wondrous transformation, he made no progress in her favor. "What signify these fripperies?" she asked him one day, "any more than did your coat of decent black? Are these also outward symbols?" "You may take them for such, madam," he answered sulkily. "You like me not as I was." "And I like you less as you are," she broke in. "Cynthia, you mock me," he cried angrily. "Now, heaven forbid." "I do but mark the change," she answered airily. "These scented clothes are but a masquerade, even as your coat of black and your cant were a masquerade. Then you simulated godliness, now you simulate heaven knows what. But now, as then, it is no more than a simulation, a pretense of something that you are not." He left her in a pet, and went in search of Gregory, into whose ear he poured the story of his woes that had their source in Cynthia's unkindness. From this resulted a stormy interview twixt Cynthia and her father, in which Cynthia at last declared that she would not be wedded to a fop. Gregory shrugged his shoulders and laughed cynically, replying that it was a way of young men to be fools, and that through folly lay the road to wisdom. "Be that as it may," she answered him with spirit, "this folly transcends all bounds. Master Stewart may return to his Scottish heather. At Castle Marley he is wasting time." "Cynthia," he cried. "Father," she pleaded, "why be angry? You would not have me marry against the inclinations of my heart? You would not have me wedded to a man whom I despise." "By what right do you despise him?" he demanded, his brow dark. "By the right of the freedom of my thoughts, the only freedom that a woman knows. For the rest, it seems she is but a chattel, of no more consideration to a man than his ox or his ass, for which the scriptures rank her, a thing to be given or taken, bought or sold, as others shall decree." Child, what know you of these things?" he cried. "You are overwrought, sweetheart," and with the promise to wait until a calmer frame of mind in her should be more propitious to what he wished to say further on this score, he left her. She went out of doors in quest of solitude among the naked trees of the park. Instead, she found Sir Crispin, seated deep in thought upon a fallen trunk. Through the trees she espied him as she approached, whilst the rustle of her gown announced to him her coming. He rose as she drew nigh, and, doffing his hat, made shift to pass on. "Sir Crispin," she called, detaining him. He turned. "Your servant, Mistress Cynthia." "Are you afraid of me, Sir Crispin?" "Beauty, madam, is wont to inspire courage rather than fear," he answered with a smile. "That, sir, is an evasion, not an answer. If read aright, Mistress Cynthia, it is also an answer. That you do not fear me, it is not a habit of mine. Why, then, have you avoided me these 3 days past? Despite himself, Crispin felt his breath quickening with a pleasure that he sought not to account for, at the thought that she should have marked his absence from her side. Because perhaps if I did not, he answered slowly, you might come to avoid me. I am a proud man, Mistress Cynthia. Satan, sir, was proud, but his pride led him perdition. So indeed may mine, he answered readily, since it leads me from you. Nay, sir, she laughed. You go from me willingly enough. Not willingly, Cynthia. Oh, not willingly, he began. Then of a sudden he checked his tongue and asked himself what he was saying. With a half-laugh and a courtier manner, he continued, Of 2 evils, madam, we must choose the lesser one. Madam, she echoed, disregarding all else that he had said. It is an ugly word, and but a moment back you called me Cynthia. 'Twas a liberty that methought my gray hairs warranted, and for which you should have reproved me. You have not gray hairs enough to warrant it, Sir Crispin, she answered archly. But what if even so I account it no liberty? I thank you for the honor. For a moment she looked at him in a puzzled way, then moved past him, and as he stood, stiffly erect, watching her graceful figure, he thought that she was about to leave him, and was glad of it. But ere she had taken 6 steps, Sir Crispin, said she, looking back at him over her shoulder, I am walking to the cliffs. Never was a man more plainly invited to become an escort, but he ignored it. A sad smile crept into his harsh face. I shall tell Kenneth if I see him, said he. At that she frowned. But I do not want him, she protested. Sooner would I go alone. Why? Then, madam, I'll tell nobody. Was ever man so dull? She asked herself. There's a fine view from the cliffs, said she. I have always thought so, he agreed. She inclined to call him a fool, yet she restrained herself. She had an impulse to go her way without him, but then she desired his company, and Cynthia was in use of having her desires frustrated. So finding him impervious to suggestion, will you not come with me? She asked at last, point blank. Why, yes, if you wish it, he answered without alacrity. You may remain, sir. Her offended tone aroused him now to the understanding that he was impolite. Contrite, he stood beside her in a moment. With your permission, mistress, I will go with you. I am a dull fellow, and today I know not what mood is on me. So sorry a one that I feared I should be poor company. Still, if you'll endure me, I'll do my best to prove entertaining. By no means, she answered coldly. I seek not the company of dull fellows. And she was gone. He stood where she had left him, and breathed a most ungallant prayer of thanks. Next he laughed softly to himself, a laugh that was woeful with bitterness. For George, he muttered, it is all that was wanting. He reseated himself upon the fallen tree, and there he set himself to reflect, and to realize that he, war-worn and callous, come to Castle Marley on such an errand as was his, should wax sick at the very thought of his sacred Chittim maid, with a mind to make a mock and a toy of him. Into his mind there entered even the possibility of flight, forgetful of the wrongs he had suffered, abandoning the vengeance he had sworn. Then with an oath he stemmed his thoughts. God in heaven, am I a boy, beardless and green? He asked himself. Am I turned 17 again, that to look into a pair of eyes should make me forget all things but their existence? Then in a burst of passion, would to heaven, he muttered, they had left me stark on Worcester Field. He rose abruptly, and set out to walk aimlessly along, until suddenly a turn in the path brought him face to face with Cynthia. She hailed him with a laugh. Sir Laggard, I knew that willy-nilly you would follow me, she cried. And he, taken aback, could not but smile in answer, and profess that she had conjectured rightly. Chapter 14. The Heart of Cynthia Ashburn. Side by side stepped that oddly assorted pair along. The maiden whose soul was as pure and fresh as the breeze that blew upon them from the sea, and the man whose life years ago had been marred by a sorrow, the quest of whose forgetfulness had led him to the mire of untold sin. The girl upon the threshold of womanhood, her life all before her, and seeming to her untainted mind a joyous, wholesome business. The man midway on his ill-starred career, his every hope blighted save the one odious. hope of vengeance, which made him cling to a life he had proved worthless and ugly, and that otherwise he had likely enough cast from him. And as they walked, "Sir Crispin," she ventured timidly, "you are unhappy, are you not?" Startled by her words and the tone of them, Galliard turned his head that he might observe her. "I unhappy?" he laughed, and it was a laugh calculated to acknowledge the fitness of her question, rather than to refute it as he intended. "Am I a clown, Cynthia, to own myself unhappy at such a season, and while you honor me with your company?" She made a wry face in protest that he fenced with her. "You are happy, then?" she challenged him. "What is happiness?" Quoth he, much as Pilate may have questioned what was truth. Then before she could reply, he hastened to add, "I have not been quite so happy these many years." "It is not of the present moment that I speak," she answered reprovingly, for she scented no more than a compliment in his words, "but of your life." Now, either was he imbued with a sense of modesty touching the deeds of that life of his, or else did he wisely realize that no theme could be less suited to discourse upon with an innocent maid. "Mistress Cynthia," said he as though he had not heard her question, "I would say a word to you concerning Kenneth." At that she turned upon him with a pout. "But it is concerning yourself that I would have you talk. It is not nice to disobey a lady. Besides, I have little interest in Master Stewart. To have little interest in a future husband augurs ill for the time when he shall come to be your husband. I thought that you at least understood me. Kenneth will never be husband of mine, Sir Crispin." "Cynthia!" he exclaimed. "Oh, lack-a-day! Am I to wed a doll?" she demanded. Is he a man a maid may love, Sir Crispin?" "Indeed, had you but seen the half of life that I have seen," said he unthinkingly, "it might amaze you what manner of man a maid may love, or at least may marry. Come, Cynthia, what fault do you find with him?" "Why, every fault." He laughed in unbelief. "And whom are we to blame for all these faults that have turned you so against him?" "Whom?" "Yourself, Cynthia. You use him ill, child. If his behavior has been extravagant, you are to blame. You are severe with him, and he, in his rash endeavors to present himself in a guise that shall render him commendable in your eyes, has overstepped discretion. Has my father bidden you to tell me this? Since when have I enjoyed your father's confidence to that degree? No, no, Cynthia. I plead the boy's cause to you because I know not because of what. It is ill to plead without knowing why. Let us forget the valiant Kenneth. They tell me, Sir Crispin," and she turned her glorious eyes upon him in a manner that must have witched a statue into answering her, "that in the royal army you were known as the Tavern Knight. They tell you truly. What of that?" "Well, what of it? Do you blush at the very thought?" "I blush." He blinked, and his eyes were full of humor as they met her grave, almost sorrowing glance. Then a full-hearted peal of laughter broke from him, and scared a flight of gulls from the rocks of Sheringham Hyde below. "Oh, Cynthia, you'll kill me," he gasped. "Picture to yourself this Crispin Galliard blushing and giggling like a schoolgirl beset by her first lover. Picture it, I say, as well, and as easily might you picture old Lucifer warbling a litany for the edification of a nonconformist parson." Her eyes were severe in their reproach. "It is always so with you. You laugh and jest and make a mock of everything. Such I doubt not has been your way from the commencement, and 'tis thus that you are come to this condition." Again he laughed, but this time it was in bitterness. "Nay, sweet mistress, you are wrong. You are very wrong. It was not always thus. Time was." He paused. "Bah! 'Tis the coward cries, time was. Leave me the past, Cynthia. It is dead, and of the dead we should speak no ill," he jested. "What is there in your past?" she insisted, despite his words. "What is there in it so to have warped a character that I am assured was once, is, indeed, still, of lofty and noble purpose? What has brought you to the level you occupy? You who were born to lead, you who—" "Have done, child, have done," he begged. "Nay, tell me. Let us sit here." And taking hold of his sleeve, she sat herself upon a mound and made room for him beside her on the grass. With a half laugh and a sigh he obeyed her, and there on the cliff, in the glow of the September sun, he took his seat at her side. A silence prevailed about them, emphasized rather than broken by the droning chant of a fisherman mending his nets on the beach below. the intermittent plash of the waves on the shingle, and the scream of the gulls that circled overhead. Before the eyes of his flesh was stretched a wide desert of sky and water, and before the eyes of his mind the hopeless desert of his 38 years. He was almost tempted to speak. The note of sympathy in her voice allured him, and sympathy was to him as drink to one who perishes of thirst. A passionate, indefinable longing impelled him to pour out the story that in Worcester he had related unto Kenneth, and thus to set himself better in her eyes, to have her realize indeed that he was come so low it was more the fault of others than his own. The temptation drew him at a headlong pace, to be checked at last by the memory that those others who had brought him to so sorry a condition were her own people. The humor passed. He laughed softly and shook his head. "There is nothing that I can tell you, child. Let us rather talk of Kenneth." "I do not wish to talk of Kenneth." "Nay, but you must. Willy-nilly must you. Think you it is only a war-worn, hard-drinking, swashbuckling ruffler that can sin? Does it not also occur to you that even a frail and tender little maid may do wrong as well?" "What wrong have I done?" she cried in consternation. "A grievous wrong to this poor lad. Can you not realize how the only desire that governs him is the laudable one of appearing favorable in your eyes? That desire gives rise, then, to curious manifestations. He is mistaken in the means he adopts. That is all. In his heart, his one aim is to win your esteem. And after all, it is a sentiment that matters, not its manifestation. Why, then, are you unkind to him? But I am not unkind. Or is it unkindness to let him see that I mislike his capers? Would it not be vastly more unkind to ignore them and encourage him to pursue their indulgence? I have no patience with him. As for those capers, I am endeavoring to show you that you yourself have driven him to them." "Sir Crispin," she cried out, "you grow tiresome." "I," said he, "I grow tiresome. I grow tiresome because I preach of duty. Marry, it is in truth a tiresome topic." "How, duty? Of what do you talk?" And a flush of incipient anger spread now on her fair cheek. "I will be clearer," said he imperturbably. "This lad is your betrothed. He is at heart a good lad, an honorable and honest lad, at times happily over-honest and over-honorable. But let that be to please a whim, a caprice. You set yourself to flout him, as is a way of your sex when you behold a man your utter slave. From this, being all unversed in the obliquity of woman, he conceives, poor boy, that he no longer finds favor in your eyes, and to win back this, the only thing that in the world he values, he behaves foolishly. You flout him anew, and because of it, he is as jealous with you as a hen with her brood." "Jealous?" echoed Cynthia. "Why? Yes, jealous. And so far does he go as to be jealous even of me," he cried, with infinitely derisive relish. "Think of it, he is jealous of me. Jealous of him, they call the Tavern Knight." She did think of it as he bade her, and by thinking she stumbled upon a discovery that left her breathless. Strange how we may bear a sentiment in our hearts without so much as suspecting its existence, until suddenly a chance word shall so urge it into life that it reveals itself with unmistakable distinctness. With her the revelation began in a vague wonder at the scorn with which Crispin invested the notion that Kenneth should have cause for jealousy on his score. Was it, she asked herself, so monstrously unnatural? Then in a flash the answer came, and it was that far from being a matter for derision, such an attitude in Kenneth lacked not for foundation. In that moment she knew that it was because of Crispin, because of this man who spoke with such very scorn of self, that Kenneth had become in her eyes so mean and unworthy a creature. Loved him she happily never had, but leastways she had tolerated, been even flattered by his wooing. By contrasting him now with Crispin, she had grown to despise him. His weakness, his pusillanimity, his meannesses of soul, stood out in sharp relief by contrast with the masterful strength and the high spirit of Sir Crispin. So easily may our ideals change that the very graces of face and form that a while ago had pleased her in Kenneth seem now effeminate attributes, well attuned to a vacillating, purposeless mind. Far greater beauty did her eyes behold in this grim-faced soldier of fortune, the man as firm of purpose as he was upright of carriage, gloomy, proud, and reckless, still young, yet past the callow age of adolescence. Since the day of his coming to Castle Marley, she had brought herself to look upon him as a hero stepped from the romancer's tales that in secret she had read. The mystery that seemed to envelop him, Those hints at a past that was not good, but the measure of whose evil in her pure innocence she could not guess. His very melancholy, his misfortunes, and the deeds she had heard assigned to him, all had served to fire her fancy and more besides, although until that moment she knew it not. Subconsciously all this had long dwelt in her mind, and now of a sudden that self-deriding speech of Crispin's had made her aware of its presence and its meaning. She loved him. That men said his life had not been nice, that he was a soldier of fortune, little better than an adventurer, a man of no worldly weight, were matters of no moment then to her. She loved him. She knew it now because he had mockingly bidden her to think whether Kenneth had cause to be jealous of him, and because upon thinking of it, she found that did Kenneth know what was in her heart, he must have more than cause. She loved him with that rare love that will urge a woman to the last sacrifice a man may ask, a love that gives and seeks nothing in return, that impels a woman to follow the man at his bidding, be his way through the world cast in places never so rugged, cleaving to him where all besides shall have abandoned him, and, however dire his lot, asking of God no greater blessing than that of sharing it. And to such a love as this Crispin was blind to the very possibility of its existence. So blind that he laughed to scorn the idea of a puny milksop being jealous of him. And so, while she sat, her soul all mastered by her discovery, her face white and still for very awe of it, he to whom this wealth was given, pursued the odious task of wooing her for another. You must have observed this insensate jealousy, he was saying. And how do you allay it? You do not. On the contrary, you excite it at every turn. You are exciting it now by having, and I dare swear for no other purpose. Lure me to walk with you, to sit here with you and preach your duty to you. And when, through jealousy, he shall have flown to fresh absurdities, shall you regret your conduct and the fruits it has borne? Shall you pity the lad, and by kindness induce him to be wiser? No, you will mock and taunt him into yet worse displays. And through these displays, which are, though you may not have thought you of it, of your own contriving, you'll conclude that he is no fit mate for you, and there will be heart-burnings, and years hence perhaps another Tavern Knight, whose name will not be Crispin Galliard. She had listened with bent head. Indeed, so deeply wrapped by her discovery that she had but heard the half of what he said. Now of a sudden she looked up, and meeting his glance, Is a woman's fault that you are as you are? No, it is not. But how does that concern the case of Kenneth? It does not. I was but curious. I was not thinking of Kenneth. He stared at her, dumbfounded. Had he been talking of Kenneth to her with such eloquence and such fervor that she should calmly tell him as he paused that it was not of Kenneth she had been thinking? You will think of him, Cynthia, he begged. You will bethink you, too, of what I have said, and by being kinder and more indulgent with this youth, you shall make him grow into a man you may take pride in. Deal fairly with him, child, and if anon you find you cannot truly love him, then tell him so. But tell him kindly and frankly, instead of using him as you are doing. She was silent a moment, and in their poignancy her feelings went very near to anger. Presently, I would. Sir Crispin, you could hear him talk of you, said she. He talks ill, not a doubt of it, and like enough he has good cause. Yet you save his life. The words awoke Crispin, the philosopher of love, to realities. He recalled the circumstances of his saving Kenneth, and the price the boy was to pay for that service, and it suddenly came to him that it was wasted breath to plead Kenneth's cause with Cynthia, when by his own future actions he was, himself, more than likely to destroy the boy's every hope of wedding her. The irony of his attitude smote him hard, and he rose abruptly. The sun hung now around, red globe upon the very brink of the sea. Hereafter he may have little cause to thank me, muttered he. Come, Mistress Cynthia, it grows late. She rose in mechanical obedience, and together they retraced their steps in silence, save a stray word exchanged at intervals touching matters of no moment. But he had not advocated Kenneth's cause in vain, for all that he little recked what his real argument had been. What influences he had evoked to urge her to make her peace with the lad. A melancholy listlessness of mind possessed her now. Crispin did not see, never would see, what was in her heart, and it might not be hers to show him. The life that might have signified was not to be lived. And since that was so, it seemed to matter little what befell. It was thus that when on the morrow her father returned to the subject, She showed herself tractable and docile out of her indifference, and to Gregory she appeared not averse to listen to what he had to advance in the boy's favor. Anon Kenneth's own humble pleading, allied to his contrite and sorrowful appearance, were received by her with that same indifference, as also with indifference did she allow him later to kiss her hand and assume the flattering belief that he was rehabilitated in her favor. But pale grew Mistress Cynthia's cheeks, and sad her soul. Wistful she waxed, sighing at every turn, until it seemed to her, as happily it seemed to many a maid, that all her life must she waste in vain sighs over a man who gave no single thought to her. Chapter 15. Joseph's Return. On his side, Kenneth strove hard during the days that followed to right himself in her eyes. But so headlong was he in the attempt and so misguided, that presently he overshot his mark by dropping an unflattering word concerning Crispin, whereby he attributed to the Tavern Knight's influence an example of the degenerate change that had of late been wrought in him. Cynthia's eyes grew hard as he spoke, and had he been wise, he had better serve his cause by talking in another vein. But love and jealousy had so addled what poor brains the Lord had bestowed upon him, that he floundered on, unmindful of any warning that took not the blunt shape of words. At length, however, she stemmed the flow of invective that his lips poured forth. "Have I not told you already, Kenneth, that it better becomes a gentleman not to slander the man to whom he owes his life? In fact, that a gentleman would scorn such an action?" As he had protested before, so did he protest now, that what he had uttered was no slander, and in his rage and mortification at the way she used him, and for which he now bitterly upbraided her, he was very near the point of tears, like the blubbering schoolboy that at heart he was. "And as for the debt, madam," he cried, striking the oaken table of the hall with his clenched hand, "it is a debt that shall be paid, a debt which this gentleman whom you defend would not permit me to contract until I had promised payment. Aye, for George, and with interest from the payment I may risk my very life." "I see no interest in that, since you risk nothing more than what you owe him," she answered, with a disdain that brought the impending tears to his eyes. But if he lacked the manliness to restrain them, he possessed at least a shame to turn his back and hide them from her. "But tell me, sir," she added, her curiosity awakened, "if I am to judge, what was the nature of this bargain?" He was silent for a moment and took a turn in the hall, mastering himself to speak, his hands clasped behind his back, and his eyes bent towards the polished floor which the evening sunlight, filtered through the gules of the leaded windows, splashed here and there with a crimson stain. She sat in the great leathern chair at the head of the board, and, watching him, waited. He was debating whether he was bound to secrecy in the matter, and in the end he resolved that he was not. Thereupon, pausing before her, he succinctly told the story Crispin had related to him that night in Worcester, the story of a great wrong, that none but a craven could have left unavenged. He added nothing to it, subtracted nothing from it, but told the tale as it had been told him on that dreadful night, the memory of which had still power to draw a shudder from him. Cynthia sat with parted lips and eager eyes, drinking in that touching narrative of suffering that was rather as some romancer's fabrication than a true account of what a living man had undergone. Now with sorrow and pity in her heart and countenance, now with anger and loathing, she listened until he had done, and even when he ceased speaking and flung himself into the nearest chair, she sat on in silence for a spell. Then of a sudden she turned a pair of flashing eyes upon the boy, and in tones charged with scorn ineffable, "You dare," she cried, "to speak of that man as you do, knowing all this, knowing what he has suffered. You dare to rail in his absence against those sins to which his misfortunes have driven him? How? Think you, would it have fared with you, you fool, had you stood in the shoes of this unfortunate? Had you fallen on your craven knees, and thanked the Lord for allowing you to keep your miserable life? Had you succumbed to the blows of fate, with a wine of texts upon your lips? Who are you?" she went on, rising breathless in her wrath, which caused him to recoil in sheer fright before her. "Who are you? And what are you, that knowing what you know of this man's life, you dare to sit in judgment upon his actions and condemn them? Answer me, you fool." But never a word had he wherewith to meet that hail of angry, contemptuous questions. The answer that had been so ready to his lips that night at Worcester, when, in a milder form the Tavern Knight had set him the same question, he dared not proffer now. The retort that Sir Crispin had not cause enough in the evil of others, which had wrecked his life, to risk the eternal damnation of his soul, he dared no longer utter. Glibly enough had he said to that stern man that which he dared not say now to the sterner beauty. Perhaps it was fear of her that made him dumb. Perhaps that at last he knew himself for what he was by contrast with the man whose vices he had so heartily despised a while ago. Shrinking back before her anger, he racked his shallow mind in vain for a fitting answer. But ere he had found one, a heavy step sounded in the gallery that overlooked the hall, and a moment later Gregory Ashburn descended. His face was ghastly white, and a heavy frown furrowed the space betwixt his brows. In the fleeting glance she bestowed upon her father, she remarked not the disorder of his countenance. Whilst for Kenneth, he had enough to hold his attention for the time. Gregory's advent set an awkward constraint upon them, nor had he any word to say as he came heavily up the hall. At the lower end of the long table he paused, and resting his hand upon the board, he seemed on the point of speaking when a sudden sound reached him that caused him to draw a sharp breath. It was a rumble of wheels and the crack of a whip. "It is Joseph," he cried, in a voice the relief of which was so marked that Cynthia noticed it. And with that exclamation, he flung past them and out through the doorway to meet his brother, so opportunely returned. He reached the terrace steps as the coach pulled up, and the lean-figured Joseph Ashburn emerged from it. "So, Gregory," he grumbled for greeting, "it was on a fool's errand you sent me. After all, that knave, your messenger, found me in London at last when I had outworn my welcome at Whitehall. But, swans, man," he cried, remarking the pallor of his brother's face, "what ails thee?" "I have news for you, Joseph," answered Gregory, in a voice that shook. "It is not Cynthia?" he inquired. "Nay, for there she stands, and her pretty lover by her side. Slife, what a coxcomb the lad's grown." And with that he hastened forward to kiss his niece, and congratulate Kenneth upon being restored to her. "I heard of it, lad, in London," quoth he, a leer upon his sallow face. "The story of how a fire-eater named Galliard befriended you, trussed a parson and a trooper, and dragged you out of jail a short hour before hanging time." Kenneth flushed. He felt the sneer in Joseph's, words like a stab. The man's tone implied that another had done for him that which he would not have dared do for himself. And Kenneth felt that this was so said in Cynthia's presence with malicious purpose. He was right. Partly it was Joseph's way to be spiteful and venomous whenever chance afforded him the opportunity. Partly he had been particularly soured at present by his recent discomforts, suffering the cause wherewith he had no sympathy, that of the union Gregory desired twixt Cynthia and Kenneth. There was an evil smile on his thin lips, and his crooked eyes rested tormentingly upon the young man. A fresh taunt trembled on his viperish tongue when Gregory plucked at the skirts of his coat and drew him aside. They entered the chamber where they had held their last interview before Joseph had set out for news of Kenneth. With an air of mystery, Gregory closed the door, then turned to face his brother. He stayed him in the act of unbuckling his sword belt. "Wait, Joseph," he cried dramatically. "This is no time to disarm. Keep your sword on your thigh. Man, you will need it as you never yet have needed it." He paused, took a deep breath, and hurled the news at his brother. "Roland Marley is here." And he sat down like a man exhausted. Joseph did not start. He did not cry out. He did not so much as change countenance. A slight quiver of the eyelids was the only outward sign he gave of the shock that his brother's announcement had occasioned. The hand that had rested on the buckle of his sword belt slipped quietly to his side, and he deliberately stepped up to Gregory, his eyes set searchingly upon the pale, flabby face before him. A sudden suspicion darting through his mind, he took his brother by the shoulders and shook him vigorously. "Gregory, you fool, you have drunk over deep in my absence." I have," wailed Gregory. "And my God, 'twas he was my table fellow and set me the example." Like enough," returned Joseph, with a contemptuous laugh. "My poor Gregory, the wine has so fouled your worthless wits at last, that they conjure up phantoms to sit at the table with you. Come, man, what petticoat business is this? Bestir yourself, fool." At that Gregory caught the drift of Joseph's suspicions. "'Tis you are the fool," he retorted angrily, springing to his feet and towering above his brother. "It was no ghost sat with me, but Roland Marley, himself in the flesh, and strangely changed by time. So changed that I knew him not, nor should I know him now but for that which, not 10 minutes ago, I overheard." His earnestness was too impressive, his sanity too obvious, and Joseph's suspicions were all scattered before it. He caught Gregory's wrist in a grip that made him wince and forced him back into his seat. "Gadslife, man, what is it you mean?" he demanded through set teeth. "Tell me." And forthwith Gregory told him of the manner of Kenneth's coming to Sheringham and to Castle Marleigh, accompanied by one Crispin Galliard, the same that had been known for his mad exploits in the late wars as Ray Kelly Galliard, and that was now known to the malignants as the Tavern Knight for his debauched habits. Crispin's mention of Roland Marleigh on the night of his arrival now returned vividly to Gregory's mind, and he repeated it, ending with a story that very evening he had overheard Kenneth telling Cynthia. "And this Galliard, then, is none other than that pup of insolence, Roland Marleigh, grown into a dog of war?" quoth Joseph. He was calm, singularly calm for one who had heard such news. "There remains no doubt of it. And you saw this man day by day, sat with him night by night over your damned sack, and knew him not? Odds wounds, man, where were your eyes? I may have been blind, but he is greatly changed. I would defy you, Joseph, to have recognized him." Joseph sneered, and the flash of his eyes told of the contempt wherein he held his brother's judgment and opinions. "Think not that, Gregory. I have cause enough to remember him," said Joseph, with an unpleasant laugh. Then, as suddenly changing his tone for one of eager anxiety, "But the lad, Gregory, does he suspect, think you?" "Not a whit. In that lies this fellow's diabolical cunning. Learning of Kenneth's relations with us, he seized the opportunity fate offered him that night at Worcester, and bound the lad on oath to help him when he should demand it, without disclosing the names of those against whom he should require his services. The boy expects at any moment to be bidden to go forth with him upon his mission of revenge, little dreaming that it is here that tragedy is to be played out. This comes of your fine matrimonial project for Cynthia," muttered Joseph acridly. He laughed his unpleasant laugh again, and for a spell there was silence. "To think, Gregory," he broke out last, "that for a fortnight he should have been beneath this roof, and you should have found no means of doing more effectively that which was done too carelessly 18 years ago." He spoke as coldly as though the matter were a trivial one. Gregory shuddered and looked at his brother in alarm. "What now, fool?" cried Joseph, scowling. "Are you as cowardly as you're blind? Damn me, sir, it seems well that I am returned. I'll have no Marleigh plague my old age for me." He paused a moment, then continued in a quieter voice, but one whose ring was sinister beyond words. "Tomorrow I shall find a way to draw this your dog of war to some secluded ground. I have some skill," he pursued, tapping his hilt as he spoke. "Besides, you shall be there, Gregory." And he smiled darkly. "Is there no other way?" asked Gregory, in distress. "There was," answered Joseph. "There was in Parliament. At Whitehall I met a man, one Colonel Pride, a bloodthirsty old Puritan soldier, who would give his right hand to see this Galliard hanged. Galliard, it seems, slew the fellow's son at Worcester. Had I but known," he added regretfully, "had your wits been keener, and you had discovered it and sent me word, I had found means to help Colonel Pride to his revenge. As it is," he shrugged his shoulders, "there is not time." "It may be," began Gregory, then stopped abruptly with an exclamation that caused Joseph to wheel sharply round. The door had opened, and on the threshold Sir Crispin Galliard stood, deferentially, hat in hand. Joseph's astonished glance played rapidly over him for a second. Then, "Who the devil may you be?" he blurted out. Despite his anxiety, Gregory chuckled at the question. The Tavern Knight came forward. "I am Sir Crispin Galliard, at your service," said he, bowing. "I was told that the master of Marleigh was returned, and that I should find you here, and I hasten, sir, to proffer you my thanks for the generous shelter this house has given me this fortnight past." Whilst he spoke, he measured Joseph with his eyes, and his glance was as hateful as his words were civil. Joseph was lost in amazement. Little trace was there in this fellow of the Roland Marleigh he had known. Moreover, he had looked to find an older man, forgetting that Roland's age could not exceed 38. Then, again, the fading light, whilst revealing the straight, supple lines of his lank figure, softened the haggardness of the face, and made him appear yet younger than the light of day would have shown him. In an instant Joseph had recovered from his surprise, and for all that his mind misgave him, tortured by a desire to learn whether Crispin was aware of their knowledge concerning him, His smile was serene, and his tones level and pleasant, as he made answer, "Sir, you are very welcome. You have valiantly served one dear to us, and the entertainment of our poor house for as long as you may deign to honor it is but the paltriest of returns." Chapter 16. The Reckoning. Sir Crispin had heard naught of what was being said as he entered the room wherein the brothers plotted against him, and he little dreamt that his identity was discovered. He had but hastened to perform that which, under ordinary circumstances, would have been a natural enough duty towards a master of the house. He had been actuated also by an impatience again to behold this Joseph Ashburn, the man who had dealt in that murderous sword thrust 18 years ago. He watched him attentively, and gathering from his scrutiny that here was a dangerous, subtle man, different, indeed, to his dull-witted brother, he had determined to act at once. And so when he appeared in the hall at supper time, he came armed and booted and equipped as for a journey. Joseph was standing alone by the huge fireplace, his face to the burning logs, and his foot resting upon one of the andirons. Gregory and his daughter were talking together in the embrasure of a window. By the other window, across the hall, stood Kenneth, alone and disconsolate, gazing out at the drizzling rain that had begun to fall. As Galliard descended, Joseph turned his head, and his eyebrows shot up and wrinkled his forehead at beholding the knight's equipment. "How is this, Sir Crispin?" said he. "You are going a journey? Too long already have I imposed myself upon the hospitality of Castle Marley." Crispin answered politely as he came and stood before the blazing logs. "Tonight, Mr. Ashburn, I go hence." A curious expression flitted across Joseph's face. The next moment, his brows still knit as he sought to fathom his sudden action, he was muttering the formal regrets that courtesy dictated. But Crispin had remarked that singular expression on Joseph's face, fleeting though it had been, and it flashed across his mind that Joseph knew him. And as he moved away toward Cynthia and her father, he thanked heaven that he had taken such measures as he had thought wise and prudent for the carrying out of his resolve. Following him with a glance, Joseph asked himself whether Crispin had discovered that he was recognized and had determined to withdraw, leaving his vengeance for another and more propitious season. In answer, little knowing the measure of the man he dealt with, he told himself it must be so, and having arrived at that conclusion, he there and then determined that Crispin should not depart free to return and plague them when he listed. Since Galliard shrank from forcing matters to an issue, he himself would do it that very night, and thereby settle for all time his business. And so ere he sat down to sup, Joseph looked to it that his sword lay at hand behind his chair at the table head. The meal was a quiet one enough. Kenneth was sulking neath the fresh ill usage, as he deemed it, that he had suffered at Cynthia's hands. Cynthia, in her turn, was grave and silent. That story of Sir Crispin's sufferings gave her much to think of, as did also his departure, and more than once did Galliard find her eyes fixed upon it with a look half of pity, half of some other feeling that he was at a loss to interpret. Gregory's big voice was little heard. The sinister glitter in his brother's I made him apprehensive and ill at ease. For him the hour was indeed in travail, and like to bring forth strange doings, but not half so much as it was for Crispin and Joseph. Each bent upon forcing matters to a head ere they quitted that board. And yet, but for these two, the meal would have passed off in dismal silence. Joseph was at pains to keep suspicion from his guest, and with that intent he talked gaily of this and that, told of slight matters that had befallen him on his recent journey, and of the doings that in London he had witnessed, investing each trifling incident with a garb of wit that rendered it entertaining. And Galliard, actuated by the same motives, grew reminiscent whenever Joseph paused and let his nimble tongue, even nimblest at a table amuse those present, or seemed to amuse them by a score of drolleries. He drank deeply, too, and this Joseph observed with satisfaction. But here again he misjudged his man. Kenneth, who ate but little, seemed also to develop an enormous thirst, and Crispin grew at length alarmed at that ever-empty goblet so often filled. He would have need of Kenneth ere the hour was out, and he rightly feared that did matters thus continue, the lad's aid was not to be reckoned with. Had Kenneth sat beside him, he might have whispered a word of restraint in his eat, but the lad was on the other side of the board. At one moment Crispin fancied that a look of intelligence passed from Joseph to Gregory, and when presently Gregory set himself to ply both him and the boy with wine, his suspicions became certainties, and he grew watchful and wary. Anon Cynthia rose. Upon the instant Galliard was also on his feet. He escorted her to the foot of the staircase, and there, "Permit me, Mistress Cynthia," said he, "to take my leave of you. In an hour or so, I shall be riding away from Castle Marley." Her eyes sought the ground, and had he been observant of her, he might have noticed that she paled slightly. "Fare you well, sir," said she in a low voice. "May happiness attend you." "Madam, I thank you. Fare you well." He bowed low. She dropped him a slight curtsy and ascended the stairs. Once as she reached the gallery above, she turned. He had resumed his seat at table and was in the act of filling his glass. The servants had withdrawn, and for half an hour thereafter they sat on, sipping their wine and making conversation, while Crispin drained bumper after bumper and grew every instant more boisterous, until at length his boisterousness passed into incoherence. His eyelids drooped heavily, and his chin kept ever and anon sinking forward onto his breast. Kenneth, flushed with wine, yet master of his wits, watched him with contempt. This was the man Cynthia preferred to him. Contempt was there also in Joseph Ashburn's eye, mingled with satisfaction. He had not looked to find the task so easy. At length he deemed the season ripe. "My brother tells me that you were once acquainted with Roland Marley," said he. "Aye," he answered thickly. "I knew the dog, a merry, reckless soul, D and me. 'Twas his recklessness killed him. Poor devil, that in your hand, Mr. Ashburn, so the story goes." "What story? What story?" echoed Crispin. "The story that I heard. Do you say I lie?" And, swaying in his chair, he sought to assume an air of defiance. Joseph laughed in a fashion that made Kenneth's blood run cold. "Why, no, I don't deny it. It was in fair fight he fell. Moreover, he brought the duel upon himself." Crispin spoke no word in answer, but rose unsteadily to his feet, so unsteadily that his chair was overset and fell with a crash behind him. For a moment he surveyed it with a drunken leer, then went lurching across the hall toward the door that led to the servants' quarters. The three men sat on, watching his antics in contempt, curiosity, and amusement. They saw him gain the heavy oaken door and close it. They heard the bolts rasp as he shot them home, and the lock click, and they saw him withdraw the key and slip it into his pocket. The cold smile still played round Joseph's lips as Crispin turned to face him again, and on Joseph's lips did that same smile freeze as he saw him standing there, erect and firm, his drunkenness all vanished, and his eyes keen and fierce, as he heard the ring of his metallic voice. "You lied, Joseph Ashburn. It was no fair fight. It was no duel. It was a foul, murderous stroke you dealt in the back, thinking to butcher him as you butcher his wife and his babe. But there's a God, Master Ashburn," he went on in an ever-swelling voice, "and I lived. Like a salamander, I came through the flames in which you sought to destroy all trace of your vile deed. I lived, and I, Crispin Galliard, the debauched Tavern Knight that was once Roland Marley, am here to demand a reckoning." The very incarnation was he then of an avenger, as he stood towering before them, his grim face livid with the passion into which he had lashed himself as he spoke, his blazing eyes watching them in that cunning, half-closed way that was his when his mood was dangerous. And yet the only one that quailed was Kenneth, his ally, upon whom comprehension burst with stunning swiftness. Joseph recovered quickly from the surprise of Crispin's suddenly reassumed sobriety. He understood the trick that Galliard had played upon them so that he might cut off their retreat in the only direction in which they might have sought assistance, and he cursed himself for not having foreseen it. Still, anxiety he felt none. His sword was to his hand, and Gregory was armed. At the very worst, they were two calm and able men opposed to a half-intoxicated boy, and a man whom fury, he thought, must strip of half his power. Probably, indeed, the lad would side with them, despite his plighted word. Again he had but to raise his voice, and though the door that Crispin had fastened was a stout one, he never doubted but that his call would penetrate it and bring his servants to rescue. And so a smile of cynical unconcern returned to his lips, and his answer was delivered in a cold, incisive voice. "The reckoning you have come to demand shall be paid you, sir. Ray Kelly Galliard is a hero of many a reckless deed, but my judgment is much at fault if this prove not his crowning recklessness and his last one. Gadswound, sir, are you mad to come hither single-handed to beard the lion in his den?" "Rather the cur in his kennel," sneered Crispin back. "Blood and wounds, Master Joseph. Think you to fright me with words?" Still Joseph smiled, deeming himself master of the situation. Were help needed, the raising of my voice would bring it me. But it is not. We are 3-1. You reckon wrongly. Mr. Stewart belongs to me tonight, bound by an oath that 'twould damn his soul to break, to help me when and where I may call upon him. And I call upon him now. Kenneth, draw your sword. Kenneth groaned as he stood by, clasping and unclasping his hands. God's curse on you, he burst out. You have tricked me, you have cheated me. Bear your oath in mind, was the cold answer. If you deem yourself wronged by me, hereafter you shall have what satisfaction you demand. But first fulfill me what you have sworn. Out with your blade, man. Still Kenneth hesitated, and but for Gregory's rash action at that critical juncture, it is possible that he would have elected to break his plighted word. But Gregory, fearing that he might determine otherwise, resolved there and then to remove the chance of it. Whipping out his sword, he made a vicious pass at the lad's breast. Kenneth avoided it by leaping backwards, but in an instant Gregory had sprung after him, and seeing himself thus beset, Kenneth was forced to draw that he might protect himself. They stood in the space between the table and that part of the hall that abutted onto the terrace. Opposite to them, by the door which he had closed, stood Crispin. At the table head, Joseph still sat cool, self-contained, even amused. He realized the rashness of Gregory's attack upon one that might yet have been won over to their side, but he never doubted that a few passes would dispose of the lad's opposition, and he sought not to interfere. Then he saw Crispin advancing towards him slowly, his rapier naked in his hand, and he was forced to look to himself. He caught at the sword that stood behind him, and leaping to his feet, he sprang forward to meet his grim antagonist. Galliard's eyes flashed out a look of joy. He raised his rapier, and their blades met. To the clash of their meeting came an echoing clash from beyond the table. "Hold, sir!" Kenneth had cried, as Gregory bore down upon him. But Gregory's answer had been a lunge which the boy had been forced to parry. Taking that crossing of blades for a sign of opposition, Gregory thrust again more viciously. Kenneth parried narrowly, his blade pointing straight at his aggressor. He saw the opening, and both instinct and the desire to repel Gregory's onslaught drew him into attempting a riposte, which drove Gregory back until his shoulders touched the panels of the wall. Simultaneously, the boy's foot struck the back of the chair, which in rising Crispin had overset, and he stumbled. How it happened, he scarcely knew, but as he hurtled forward, his blade slid along his opponent's, and entering Gregory's right shoulder pinned him to the wainscot. Joseph heard the tinkle of a falling blade, and assumed it to be Kenneth's. For the rest, he was just then too busy to dare withdraw for a second his eyes from Crispin's. Until that hour, Joseph Ashburn had accounted himself something of a swordsman, and more than a match for most masters of the weapon. But in Crispin he found offensive equality, such as he had never yet encountered. Every feint, every bot in his catalog had he paraded in quick succession, yet ever with the same result. His point was foiled and put aside with ease. Desperately he fought now, darting that point as hither and thither in and out whenever the slightest opening offered. Yet ever did it meet the gentle, averting pressure of Crispin's blade. He fought on and marveled as the seconds went by that Gregory came not to his aid. Then the sickening thought that perhaps Gregory was overcome occurred to him. In such a case, he must reckon upon himself alone. He cursed the overconfidence that had led him into that ever-fatal error of underestimating his adversary. He might have known that one who had acquired Sir Crispin's fame was no ordinary man, but one accustomed to face great odds and master them. He might call for help. He marveled as the thought occurred to him that the clatter of their blades had not drawn his servants from their quarters. Fencing still, he raised his voice. "Ho, there! John, Stephen!" "Spare your breath," growled the knight. "I dare swear you'll have need of it. None will hear you, call as you will. I gave your 4 henchmen a flagon of wine, wherein to drink to my safe journey hence. They have emptied it ere this, I make no doubt, and a single glass of it would set the hardest toper asleep for the round of clock." An oath was Joseph's only answer. A curse it was upon his own folly and assurance. A little while ago he had thought to have drawn so tight a net about this ruler, and here was he now taken in its very toils, well nigh exhausted and in his enemy's power. It occurred to him then that Crispin stayed his hand, that he fenced only on the defensive, and he wondered what might his motive be. He realized that he was mastered, and that at any moment Galliard might send home his blade. He was bathed from head to foot in a sweat that was at once of exertion and despair. A frenzy seized him. Might he not yet turn to advantage this hesitancy of Crispin's to strike the final blow? He braced himself for a supreme effort, and turning his wrist from a simulated thrust in the first position, he doubled and, stretching out, lunged vigorously in cart. As he lengthened his arm in the stroke, there came a sudden twitch at his wrist. The weapon was twisted from his grasp, and he stood disarmed at Crispin's mercy. A gurgling cry broke despite him from his lips, and his eyes grew wide in a sickly terror as they encountered the knight's sinister glance. Not 3 paces behind him was the wall, and on it, within a hand's easy reach, hung many a trophied weapon that might have served him then. But the fascination of fear was upon him, benumbing his wits and paralyzing his limbs, with the thought that the next pulsation of his tumultuous heart would prove its last. The calm, unflinching courage that had been Joseph's only virtue was shattered, and his iron that had unscrupulously held hitherto his very conscience in bondage was turned to water now that he stood face to face with death. Eons of time, it seemed to him, were sped since the sword was wrenched from his hand, and still the stroke he awaited came not. Still Crispin stood, sinister and silent before him, watching him with magnetic, fascinating eyes, as the snake watches a bird, eyes from which Joseph could not withdraw his own, and yet before which it seemed to him that he quaked and shriveled. The candles were burning low in their sconces, and the corners of that ample, gloomy hall were filled with mysterious shadows that formed a setting well attuned to the grim picture made by those 2 figures, the one towering stern and vengeful, the other crouching palsied and livid. Beyond the table, and with the wounded Gregory, lying unconscious and bleeding, at his feet, stood Kenneth, looking on in silence, in wonder and in some horror too. To him also, as he watched, the seconds seemed minutes from the time when Crispin had disarmed his opponent, until with a laugh, short and sudden as a stab, he dropped his sword and caught his victim by the throat. However fierce the passion that had actuated Crispin, it had been held hitherto in strong subjection. But now at last it suddenly welled up and mastered him, causing him to cast all restraint to the winds, to abandon reason, and to give way to the lust of rage that rendered ungovernable his mood. Like a burst of flame from embers that had been smoldering was the upleaping of his madness, transfiguring his face and transforming his whole being. A new, unconquerable strength possessed him. His pulses throbbed swiftly and madly with the quickened coursing of his blood, and his soul was filled with the cruel elation that attends a lust about to be indulged, the elation of the beast about to rend its prey. He was pervaded by the desire to wreak slowly and with his hands the destruction of his broken enemy. To have passed his sword through him would have been too swiftly done. The man would have died, and Crispin would have known nothing of his sufferings. But to take him thus by the throat, slowly to choke the life's breath out of him, to feel his desperate, writhing struggles, to be conscious of every agonized twitch of his sinews, to watch the purpling face, the swelling veins, the protruding eyes filled with a dumb horror of his agony, to hold him thus, each second becoming a distinct, appreciable division of time, and thus to take what payment he could for all the blighted years that lay behind him. This he felt would be something like revenge. Meanwhile, the shock of surprise at the unlooked-for movement had awakened again the man in Joseph. For a second, even hope knocked at his heart. He was sinewy and active, and perchance he might yet make Gallia repent that he had discarded his rapier. The knight's reason for doing so he thought he had in Crispin's contemptuous words. Good steel were too great an honor for you, Mr. Ashburn. And as he spoke, his lean, nervous fingers tightened about Joseph's throat in a grip that crushed the breath from him, and with the newborn hope of proving master in his fresh combat. He had not reckoned with this galley-weaned strength of Crispin's, a strength that was a revelation to Joseph as he felt himself almost lifted from the ground and swung this way and that, like a babe in the hands of a grown man. Vain were his struggles. His strength ebbed fast. The blood, held overlong in his head, was already obscuring his vision, when at last the grip relaxed and his breathing was freed. As his sight cleared again, he found himself back in his chair at the table head, and beside him Sir Crispin, his left hand resting upon the board, his right grasping once more the sword, and his eyes bent mockingly and evilly upon his victim. Kenneth, looking on, could not repress a shudder. He had known Crispin for a tempestuous man quickly moved to wrath, and he had oftentimes seen anger make terrible his face and glance. But never had he seen aught in him to rival this present frenzy. It rendered satanical the baleful glance of his eyes, and the awful smile of hate and mockery with which he gazed at last upon the helpless quarry that he had waited 18 years to bring to earth. "I would," said Crispin in a harsh, deliberate voice, "that you had a score of lives, Master Joseph. As it is, I have done what I could. 2 agonies have you undergone already, and I am inclined to mercy. The end is at hand. If you have prayers to say them, Master Ashburn, though I doubt me it will be wasted breath. You are overripe for hell." "You mean to kill me," he gasped, growing yet a shade more livid. "Does a suspicion of it occur to you?" laughed Crispin. "And yet twice already have I given you a foretaste of death. Think you I but jested?" Joseph's teeth clicked together in a snap of determination. That sneer of Crispin's acted upon him as a blow, but as a blow that arouses a desire to retaliate rather than lays low. He braced himself for fresh resistance, not of action, for that he realized was futile, but of argument. "It is murder that you do," he cried. "No, it is justice. It has been long on the way, but it has come at last. Bethink you, Mr. Marley." "Call me not by that name," cried the other harshly, fearfully. "I have not borne it these 18 years, and thanks to what you have made me, it is not meet that I should bear it now." There was a pause. Then Joseph spoke again with great calm and earnestness. "Bethink you, Sir Crispin, of what you are about to do. It can benefit you in naught. Odds life, think you it cannot? Think you it will benefit me naught to see you earn at last your reward? You may have dearly to pay for what at best must prove a fleeting satisfaction. Not a fleeting one, Joseph," he laughed, "but one the memory of which shall send me rejoicing through what years or days of life be left me. A satisfaction that for 18 years I have been waiting to experience, though the moment after be mine find me stark and cold. Sir Crispin, you are in enmity with the Parliament, an outlaw almost. I have some influence, much influence, by exerting it." "Have done, sir," cried Crispin angrily. "You talk in vain. What to me is life, or aught that life can give, if I have so long endured the burden of it? It has been so that I might draw from it this hour. Do you think there is any bribe you could offer would turn me from my purpose?" A groan from Gregory, who was regaining consciousness, drew his attention aside. "Truss him up, Kenneth," he commanded, pointing to the recumbent figure. "How? Do you hesitate? Now, as God lives, I'll be obeyed, or you shall have an unpleasant reminder of the oath you swore me." With a look of loathing, the lad dropped on his knees to do as he was bidden. Then of a sudden, "I have not the means," he announced. "Fool, does he not wear a sword belt and a sash? Come, attend to it." "Why do you force me to do this?" The lad still protested passionately. "You have tricked and cheated me, yet I have kept my oath and rendered you the assistance you required. They are in your power now. Can you not do the rest yourself? On my soul, Master Stewart, I am over-patient with you. Are we to wrangle at every step before you'll take it? I will have your assistance through this matter as you swore to give it. Come, trust me that fellow, and I've done with words." His fierceness overthrew the boy's outburst of resistance. Kenneth had wit enough to see that his mood was not one to brook much opposition, and so, with an oath and a groan, he went to work to pinion Gregory. Then Joseph spoke again. "Weigh well this act of yours, Sir Crispin," he cried. "You are still young. Much of life lies yet before you. Do not wantonly destroy it by an act that cannot repair the past. But it can avenge it, Joseph. As for my life, you destroyed it years ago. The future has naught to offer me. The present has this." And he drew back his sword to strike. Chapter 17. Joseph drives a bargain. A new terror leapt into Joseph's eyes at that movement of Crispin's, and for the third time that night did he taste the agony that is death's forerunner. Yet Galliard delayed the stroke. He held his sword poised, the point aimed at Joseph's breast, and holding, he watched him, marking each phase of the terror reflected upon his livid countenance. He was loath to strike, for to strike would mean to end this exquisite torture of horror to which he was subjecting him. Broken Joseph had been before and passive. Now of a sudden he grew violent again, but in a different way. He flung himself upon his knees before Sir Crispin, and passionately he pleaded for the sparing of his miserable life. Crispin looked on with an eye both of scorn and of cold relish. It was thus he wished to see him, broken and agonized. suffering thus something of all that which he himself had suffered through despair in the years that were sped. With satisfaction then he watched his victim's agony. He watched it too with scorn and some loathing, for a craven was in his eyes an ugly sight, and Joseph in that moment was truly become as vile a coward as ever man beheld. His parchment-like face was gray and mottled, his brow bedewed with sweat. His lips were blue and quivering, his eyes bloodshot and almost threatening tears. In the silence of one who waits stood Crispin, listening, calm and unmoved, as though he heard not, until Joseph's whining prayers culminated in an offer to make reparation. Then Crispin broke in at length with an impatient gesture. "What reparation can you make, you murderer? Can you restore to me the wife and child you butchered 18 years ago?" "I can restore your child at least," returned the other. "I can and will restore him to you, if you but stay your hand. That and much more will I do to repair the past." Unconsciously, Crispin lowered his sword arm, and for a full minute he stood and stared at Joseph. His jaw was fallen, and the grim firmness all gone from his face, and replaced by amazement, then unbelief followed by inquiry, then unbelief again. The pallor of his cheeks seemed to intensify. At last, however, he broke into a hard laugh. "What lie is this you offer me? Zounds, man, are you not afraid?" "It is no lie," Joseph cried, in accents so earnest that some of the unbelief passed again from Galliard's face. "It is the truth, God's truth. Your son lives." "Hellhound, it is a lie. On that fell night, as I swooned under your cowardly thrust, I heard you calling to your brother to slit the squalling bastard's throat. Those were your very words, Master Joseph. I own I bade him do it, but I was not obeyed. He swore we should give the babe a chance of life. It should never know whose son it was, he said, and I agreed. We took the boy away. He has lived and thrived." The knight sank onto a chair as though bereft of strength. He sought to think, but thinking coherently he could not. At last, "How shall I know that you are not lying? What proof can you advance?" he demanded hoarsely. "I swear that what I have told you is true. I swear it by the cross of our Redeemer," he protested, with a solemnity that was not without effect upon Crispin. Nevertheless, he sneered. "I ask for proofs, man, not oaths. What proofs can you afford me? There are the man and the woman whom the lad was reared by. And where shall I find them?" Joseph opened his lips to answer, then closed them again. In his eagerness, he had almost parted with the information which he now proposed to make the price of his life. He regained confidence at Crispin's tone and questions, gathering from both that the knight was willing to believe if proof were set before him. He rose to his feet, and when next he spoke his voice had won back much of its habitual calm deliberateness. "That," said he, "I will tell you when you have promised to go hence, leaving Gregory and me unharmed. I will supply you with what money you may need, and I will give you a letter to those people, so couched that what they tell you by virtue of it shall be a corroboration of my words." His elbow resting upon the table, and his hand his brow, so that it shaded his eyes, sat Crispin long in thought, swayed by emotions and doubts, the like of which he had never yet known in the whole of his checkered life. Was Joseph lying to him? That was the question that repeatedly arose, and oddly enough, for all his mistrust of the man, he was inclined to account true the ring of his words. Joseph watched him with much anxiety and some hope. At length Crispin withdrew his hands from eyes that were grown haggard and rose. "Let us see the letter that you will write," said he. "There you have pen, ink, and paper. Write." "You promise?" asked Joseph. "I will tell you when you have written." In a hand that shook somewhat, Joseph wrote a few lines, then handed Crispin the sheet, whereon he read, "The bearer of this is Sir Crispin Galliard, who is intimately interested in the matter that lies betwixt us, and whom I pray you answer fully and accurately the questions he may put you in that connection." "I understand," said Crispin slowly. "Yes, it will serve. Now the superscription." And he returned the paper. Ashburn was himself again by now. He realized the advantage he had gained, and he would not easily relinquish it. "I shall add the superscription," said he calmly, "when you swear to depart without further molesting us." Crispin paused a moment, weighing the position well in his mind. If Joseph lied to him now, he would find means to return, he told himself, and so he took the oath demanded. Joseph dipped his pen and paused meditatively to watch a drop of ink, wherewith it was overladen, fall back into the horn. The briefest of pauses was it, Yet it was not the accident it appeared to be. Hitherto Joseph had been as sincere as he had been earnest, intent alone upon saving his life at all costs, and forgetting in his fear of the present dangers that the future might hold for him were Crispin Galliard still at large. But in that second of dipping his quill, assured that the peril of the moment was overcome, and that Crispin would go forth as he said, the devil whispered in his ear a cunning and vile suggestion. As he watched the drop of ink roll from his pen point, he remembered that in London there dwelt at the sign of the Anchor, in Thames Street, one Colonel Pride, whose son this Galliard had slain, and who, did he once lay hands upon him, was not like to let him go again. In a second was the thought conceived and the determination taken. And as he folded the letter and set upon it the superscription, Joseph felt that he could have cried out in his exultation at the cunning manner in which he was outwitting his enemy. Crispin took the package and read thereon, "This is to Mr. Henry Lane, at the sign of the Anchor, Thames Street, London." The name was a fictitious one that Joseph had set down upon the spur of the moment, his intention being to send a messenger that should outstrip Sir Crispin and warn Colonel Pride of his coming. "It is well," was Crispin's only comment. He, too, was grown calm again and fully master of himself. He placed the letter carefully within the breast of his doublet. "If you have lied to me, if this is but a shift to win your miserable life, rest assured, Master Ashburn, that you have but put off the day for a very little while." It was on Joseph's lips to answer that none of us are immortal, but he bethought him that the pleasantry might be ill-timed and bowed in silence. Galliard took his hat and cloak from the chair on which he had placed them upon descending that evening. Then he turned again to Joseph. "You spoke of money a moment ago," he said, in the tones of one demanding what is his own, the tones of a gentleman speaking to his steward. "I will take 200 Caroluses. More I cannot carry in comfort." Joseph gasped at the amount. For a second it even entered his mind to resist the demand. Then he remembered that there was a brace of pistols in his study. If he could get those, he would settle matters there, and then, without the aid of Colonel Pride. "I will fetch the money," said he, betraying his purpose by his alacrity. "By your leave, Master Ashburn, I will come with you." Joseph's eyes flashed him a quick look of baffled hate. "As you will," said he, with an ill grace. As they passed out, Crispin turned to Kenneth. "Remember, sir, you are still in my service. See that you keep good watch." Kenneth bent his head without replying, but Master Gregory required little watching. He lay a helpless, half-swooning heap upon the floor, which he had smeared with the blood oozing from his wounded shoulder. Even were he untrussed, there was little to be feared from him. During the brief while they were alone together, Kenneth did not so much as attempt to speak to him. He sat himself down upon the nearest chair, and with his chin in his hands, his elbows on his knees, he pondered over the miserable predicament into which Sir Crispin had got him, and more bitter than ever had been was his enmity at that moment towards the knight. That Galliard should be upon the eve of finding his son, and a sequel to the story he had heard from him that night in Worcester, was to Kenneth a thing of no interest or moment. Galliard had ruined him with these Ashburns. He could never now hope to win the hand of Cynthia, to achieve which he had been willing to turn both fool and knave. I had turned both. There was naught left him but to return him to the paltry Scottish estate of his fathers, there to meet the sneers of those who no doubt had heard that he was gone south to marry a great English heiress. That at such a season he could think of this, but serves to prove the shallow nature of his feelings. A love was as that had gain and vanity for its foundation. In fact, it was no love at all, for what he accounted love for Cynthia was but the love of himself, which through Cynthia he sought to indulge. He cursed the ill luck that had brought Crispin into his life. He cursed Crispin for the evil he had suffered from him, forgetting that but for Crispin he would have been carrion a month ago and more. Deep in his bitter musings was he when the door opened again to admit Joseph, followed by Galliard. The knight came across the hall and stooped to look at Gregory. "You may untruss him, Kenneth, when I am gone," said he, "and in a quarter of an hour from now you are released from your oath to me. Fare you well," he added with unusual gentleness, and turning a glance that was almost regretful upon the lad. "We are not like to meet again, but should we, I trust it may be in happier times. If I have harmed you in this business, remember that my need was great. Fare you well." And he held out his hand. "Take yourself to hell, sir," answered Kenneth, turning his back upon him. The ghost of an evil smile played round Joseph Ashburn's lips as he watched them. Chapter 18. Counterplot. So soon as Sir Crispin had taken his departure, and whilst yet the beat of his horse's hoofs was to be distinguished above the driving storm of rain and wind without, Joseph hastened across the hall to the servants' quarters. There he found his 4 grooms slumbering deeply, their faces white and clammy, and their limbs twisted into odd, helpless attitudes. Vainly did he rain down upon them kicks and curses. Arouse them he could not from the stupor in whose thrall they lay. In his absence the lad had dressed Gregory's wound. He had induced him to take a little wine, and had set him upon a chair, in which he now lay back, white and exhausted. "The quarter of an hour is past, sir," said Joseph coldly, as he entered. Kenneth made no sign that he heard. He sat on like a man in a dream. His eyes that saw nothing were bent upon Gregory's pale, flabby face. "The quarter of an hour is past, sir," Joseph repeated in a louder voice. Kenneth looked up, then rose and sighed, passing his hand wearily across his forehead. "I understand, sir," he replied in a low voice. "You mean that I must go?" Joseph waited a moment before replying. Then, "It is past midnight," he said slowly, "and the weather is wild. You may lie here until morning, if you are so minded. But go you must then," he added sternly. "I need scarce say, sir, that you must have no speech with Mistress Cynthia, nor that never again must you set foot within Castle Marley." "I understand, sir, I understand. But you deal hardly with me." Joseph raised his eyebrows in questioning surprise. "I was the victim of my oath, given when I knew not against whom my hand was to be lifted." "Oh! Sir, am I to suffer all my life for a fault that was not my own?" "You, Master Gregory," he cried, turning passionately to Cynthia's father, "you are perchance more merciful? You understand my position, how I was forced into it." Gregory opened his heavy eyes. "A plague on you, Master Stewart," he groaned. "I understand that you have given me a wound that will take a month to heal. It was an accident, sir. I swear it was an accident." "To swear this, and that appears to be your chief diversion in life," growled Gregory for answer. "You had best go. We are not likely to listen to excuses." "Did you rather suggest a remedy?" Joseph put in quietly. "We might hear you." Kenneth swung round and faced him, hope brightening his eyes. "What remedy is there? How can I undo what I have done? Show me but the way, and I'll follow it, no matter where it leads." Such protestations had Joseph looked to hear, and he was hard put to it to dissemble his satisfaction. For a while he was silent, making pretense to ponder. At length, "Kenneth," he said, "you may in some measure repair the evil you have done, and if you are ready to undergo some slight discomfort, I shall be willing on my side to forget this night. Tell me how, sir, and whatever the cost I will perform it." He gave no thought to the fact that Crispin's grievance against the Ashburns was well-founded, that they had wrecked his life even as they had sought to destroy it, even as 18 years ago they had destroyed his wife's. His only thought was Cynthia. His only wish was to possess her. Besides that, justice and honor itself were a small account. "It is but a slight matter," answered Joseph, "a matter that I might entrust to one of my grooms." That whilst his grooms lay drugged, the matter was so pressing that his messenger must set out that very night. Joseph did not think of adding, "I would, sir," answered the boy, "that the task were great and difficult." "Yes, yes," answered Joseph with biting sarcasm. "We are acquainted with both your courage and your resource." He sat silent and thoughtful for some moments, then with a sudden sharp glance at the lad. "You shall have this chance of setting yourself right with us," he said. Then abruptly he added, "Go make ready for a journey. You must set out within the hour for London. Take what you may require and arm yourself. Then return to me here." Gregory, who, despite his sluggish wits, divined, partly at least, what was afoot, made shift to speak, but his brother silenced him with a glance. "Go," Joseph said to the boy, and, without comment, Kenneth rose and left them. "What would you do?" asked Gregory when the door had closed. "Make doubly sure of that ruffian," answered Joseph coldly. "Colonel Pride might be absent when he arrives, and he might learn that none of the name of Lane dwells at the Anchor in Thames Street. It would be fatal to awaken his suspicions and bring him back to us. But surely Richard or Stephen might carry your errand? They might were they not so drugged that they cannot be aroused. I might even go myself, but it is better so." He laughed softly. "There is even comedy in it." Kenneth shall outride our bloodthirsty knight to warn pride of his coming. And when he comes, he will walk into the hands of the hangman. It will be a surprise for him. For the rest, I shall keep my promise concerning his son. He shall have news of him from pride, but when too late to be of service. Gregory shuddered. For God, Joseph, 'tis a foul thing you do, he cried. Sooner would I never set eyes on the lad again. Let him go his ways as you intended. I never did intend it. What trustier messenger could I find now that I have lent him zest by fright? To win Cynthia, we may rely upon him safely to do that in which another might fail. Joseph, you will roast in hell for it. Joseph laughed him to scorn. To bed with you, you canting hypocrite. Your wound makes you light-headed. It was a half-hour ere Kenneth returned, booted, cloaked, and ready for his journey. He found Joseph alone, busily writing, and in obedience to a sign, he sat him down to wait. A few minutes passed, then, with a final scratch and splutter, Joseph flung down his pen. With the sandbox tilted in the air, like a dicer about to make his throw, he looked at the lad. You will spare neither whip nor spur until you arrive in London, Master Kenneth. You must ride night and day. The matter is of the greatest urgency. Kenneth nodded that he understood, and Joseph sprinkled the sand over the written page. I know not when you should reach London so that you may be in time, but, he continued, and as he spoke, he creased the paper and poured the superfluous sand back into the box. I should say that by midnight tomorrow your message should be delivered. Aye, he continued, in answer to the lad's gasp of surprise. It is hard riding, I know, but if you will win Cynthia, you must do it. Spare neither money nor horseflesh, and keep to the saddle until you are in Thames Street. He folded the letter, sealed it, and wrote the superscription. This to Colonel Pride, at the sign of the Anchor in Thames Street. He rose and handed the package to Kenneth, to whom the superscription meant nothing, since he had not seen that borne by the letter which Crispin had received. You will deliver this intact, and with your own hands, to Colonel Pride in person, none other, should he be absent from Thames Street upon your arrival. Seek him out instantly, wherever he may be, and give him this. Upon your faithful observance of these conditions, remember that your future depends. If you are in time, as indeed I trust and think you will be, you may account yourself Cynthia's husband. Fail and, well, you need not return here. I shall not fail, sir, cried Kenneth. What man can do to accomplish the journey within 24 hours, I will do. He would have stopped to thank Joseph for the signal favor of this chance of rehabilitation, but Joseph cut him short. Take this purse, he cried impatiently. You'll find a horse ready saddled in the stables. Ride it hard. It will bear you to Norton at least. They'll get you a fresh one, and when that is done, another. Now be off. Chapter 19. The Interrupted Journey. When the Tavern Knight left the gates of Marley Park behind him on that wild October night, he drove deep the rowels of his spurs and set his horse at a perilous gallop along the road to Norwich. The action was of instinct rather than of thought. In the turbulent sea of his mind, one clear current there was, and one only, the knowledge that he was bound for London for news of the son of his whom Joseph told him lived. He paused not even to speculate what manner of man his child was grown, nor yet what walk of life he had been reared to tread. He lived. He was somewhere in the world. That for the time sufficed him. The Ashburns had not, it seemed, destroyed quite everything that made his life worth enduring, the life that so often and so wantonly he had exposed. His son lived, and in London he should have news of him. To London then must he get himself with all dispatch, and he swore to take no rest until he reached it, and with that firm resolve to urge him, he plowed his horse's flanks and sped on through the night. The rain beat in his face, yet he scarce remarked it, as again more by instinct than by reason, he buried his face to the eyes in the folds of his cloak. Later the rain ceased, and clearer grew the line of light betwixt the hedgerows, by which his horse had steered its desperate career. Fitfully a crescent moon peered out from among the wind-driven clouds. The poor ruffler was fallen into meditation, and noted not that his nag did no more than amble. He roused himself of a sudden when halfway down a gentle slope some 5 miles from Norwich, and out of temper at discovering the sluggishness of the pace, he again gave the horse a taste of the spurs. The action was fatal. The incline was become a bed of sodden clay, and he had not noticed with what misgivings his horse pursued the treacherous footing. The sting of the spur made the animal bound forward, and the next instant a raucous oath broke from Crispin as the nag floundered and dropped on its knees. Like a stone from a catapult, Galliard flew over its head and rolled down the few remaining yards of slope into a very lake of slimy water at the bottom. Down this same hill, some 20 minutes later, came Kenneth Stewart with infinite precaution. He was in haste, a haste more desperate far than even Crispin's. But his character held none of Galliard's recklessness, nor were his wits fogged by such news as Crispin had heard that night. He realized that to be swift, he must be cautious in his night riding. And so, carefully he came, with a firm hand on the reins, yet leaving it to his horse to find safe footing. He had reached the level ground in safety, and was about to put his nag to a smarter pace, when of a sudden from the darkness of the hedge he was hailed by a harsh, metallic voice, the sound of which sent a tremor through him. "Sir, you are choicely met, whoever you may be. I have suffered a mischance down that cursed hill, and my horse has gone lame." Kenneth kept his cloak over his mouth, trusting that the muffling would sufficiently disguise his accents as he made answer. "I am in haste, my master. What is your will?" "Why, marry, so am I in haste. My will is your horse, sir." "Oh, I'm no robber. I'll pay you for it, and handsomely. But have it I must. 'Twill be no great discomfort for you to walk to Norwich. You may do it in an hour." "My horse, sir, is not for sale," was Kenneth's brief answer. "Give you good night." "Hold, man. Blood and hell. Stop. If you'll not sell the worthless beast to serve a gentleman, I'll shoot it under you. Make your choice." Kenneth caught the gleam of a pistol barrel pointed at him from a hedge, and he shivered. What was he to do? Every instant was precious to him. As in a flash it came to him that perchance Sir Crispin also rode to London, and that it was expected of him to arrive there first if he were to be in time. Swiftly he weighed the odds in his mind, and took the determination to dash past Sir Crispin, risking his aim and trusting to the dark to befriend him. But even as he determined thus, what moon there was became unveiled, and the light of it fell upon his face, which was turned towards Galliard. An exclamation of surprise escaped Sir Crispin. "Slife, Master Stewart, I knew not your voice. Whither do you ride? What is it to you? Have you not wrought enough of evil for me? Am I never to be rid of you? Castle Marley," he added, with well-feigned anger, "has closed its doors upon me. What does it signify to you whither I ride? Suffer me leastways to pass unmolested, and to leave you." Kenneth's passionate reproaches cut Galliard keenly. He held himself at that moment a very knave for having dragged his boy into his work of vengeance, and thereby cast a blight upon his life. He sought for words wherein to give expression to something of what he felt. Then, realizing how futile and effete all words must prove, he waved his hand in the direction of the road. "Go, Master Stewart," he muttered. "Your way is clear." And Kenneth, waiting for no second invitation, rode on and left him. He rode with gratitude in his heart to the Providence that had caused him so easily to overcome an obstacle that at first he had held impassable. Stronger grew in his mind conviction that to fulfill the mission Joseph required of him, he must reach London before Sir Crispin. The knowledge that he was ahead of him, and that he must derive an ample start from Galliard's mishap, warmed him like wine. His mind thus relieved from its weight of anxiety, he little recked fatigue, and such excellent use did he make of his horse that he reached Newmarket on an hour before the morrow's moon. An hour he rested there and broke his fast. Then on a fresh horse, a powerful and willing animal, he set out once more. By 2:30, he was at Newport. But so hard had he ridden that man and beast alike were in a lather of sweat, and whilst he himself felt sick and tired, the horse was utterly unfit to bear him farther. For half an hour he rested there, and made a meal whose chief constituent was brandy. Then, on a third horse, he started upon the last stage of his journey. The wind was damp and penetrating, the roads veritable morasses of mud, and overhead gloomy banks of dark, gray clouds moved sluggishly, the light that was filtered to them giving the landscape a bleak and dreary aspect. In his jaded condition, Kenneth soon became a prey to the depression of it. His lightness of heart of some dozen hours ago was now all gone, and not even the knowledge that his mission was well nigh accomplished sufficed to cheer him. To add to his discomfort, a fine rain set in towards 4 o'clock, and when a couple of hours later he clattered along the road cut through a wooded slope in the direction of Waltham, he was become a very limp and lifeless individual. He noticed not the horseman moving cautiously among the closely set trees on either side of the road. It was growing prematurely dark, and objects were none too distinct. And thus it befell that when from a reverie of dejection into which he had fallen, he was suddenly aroused by the thud of hoofs. He looked up to find 2 mounted men barring the road some 10 yards in front of him. Their attitude was unmistakable, and it crossed poor Kenneth's mind that he was beset by robbers. But a second glance showed him their red cloaks and military steel caps, and he knew them for soldiers of the Commonwealth. Hearing the beat of hoofs behind him, he looked over his shoulder to see 4 other troopers closing rapidly down upon him. Clearly, he was the object of their attention. He had been a fool not to have perceived this earlier, and his heart misgave him. For all that had he paused to think, he must have realized that he had naught to fear, and that in this some mistake must lie. "Halt!" thundered the deep voice of the sergeant, who, with a trooper, held the road in front. Kenneth drew up within a yard of them, conscious that the man's dark eyes were scanning him sharply from beneath his morion. "Who are you, sir?" the bass voice demanded. Alas for the vanity of poor human mites. Even Kenneth, who never yet had achieved aught for the cause he served, grew of a sudden chill to think that perchance this sergeant might recognize his name for one that he had heard before associated with deeds performed on the king's behalf. For a second he hesitated. Then, "Blunt," he stammered. "Jasper Blunt." He little thought how that fruit of his vanity was to prove his undoing thereafter. "Verily," sneered the sergeant, almost seemed to have forgotten it. And from that sneer Kenneth gathered with fresh dread that the fellow mistrusted him. "Whence are you, Master Blunt?" Again Kenneth hesitated. Then, recalling Ashburn's high favor with the Parliament, and seeing that it could but advance his cause, to state the true sum of his journey. "From Castle Marleigh," he replied. "Verily, sir, you seem yet in some doubt. Whither do you go?" "To London." "On what errand?" The sergeant's questions fell swift as sword strokes. "With letters for Colonel Pride." The reply, delivered more boldly than Kenneth had spoken hitherto, was not without its effect. "From whom are these letters?" "From Mr. Joseph Ashburn of Castle Marleigh." "Produce them." With trembling fingers, Kenneth complied. This the sergeant observed as he took the package. "What ails you, man?" quoth he. "Naught, sir, 'tis the cold." The sergeant scanned the package and its seal. In a measure, it was a passport, and he was forced to the conclusion that this man was indeed the messenger he represented himself. Certainly he had not the air nor the bearing of him for whom they waited, nor did the sergeant think that their quarry would have armed himself with a dummy package against such a strait. And yet the sergeant was not master after all, and did he let this fellow pursue his journey, he might reap trouble for it hereafter. Whilst likewise, if he detained him, Colonel Pride, he knew, was not an over-patient man. He was still debating what course to take, and had turned to his companion with a muttered question. "What think you, Peter?" when by his precipitancy Kenneth ruined his slender chance of being permitted to depart. "I pray you, sir, now that you know my errand, suffer me to pass on." There was an eager tremor in his voice that the sergeant mistook for fear. He noted it, and remembering the boy's hesitancy in answering his earlier questions, he decided upon his course of action. "We shall not delay your journey, sir," he answered, eyeing Kenneth sharply. "And as your way must lie through Waltham, I will but ask you to suffer us to ride with you thus far, so that you may answer any questions our captain may have to ask ere you proceed." "But, sir—" "No more, Master Courier," snarled the sergeant. Then, beckoning a trooper to his side, he whispered an order in his ear. As the man withdrew, they wheeled their horses, and at a sharp word command, Kenneth rode on towards Waltham between the sergeant and a trooper.